So there's an article that caught my eye about COVID deaths that just came out. Go ahead and throw up these graphics here. Uncounted. This is from the Missouri Independent. Uncounted, inaccurate death certificates across the country hide the true toll of COVID-19. Some counties, like Cape Girardeau, have seen a spike in deaths that aren't attributed to COVID-19. Many of them, blamed on natural causes, are likely from the coronavirus. So I'm going to get to that article on the left in a second, but on the right you see here, this is from months back. Excess deaths reveal the pandemic's hidden toll in some U.S. counties. A detailed analysis suggests that COVID deaths and other pandemic-related mortality may have been significantly undercounted in the rural South and West. Okay, so that article on the left there, the Missouri Independent one, from that piece, in Cape Girardeau County, Missouri, the coroner hasn't pronounced a single person dead of COVID-19 in the year 2021. Not a single person. Wavis Jordan, a Republican who was elected last year to serve as a coroner of the 80,000-person county, says his office, quote, doesn't do COVID deaths. Doesn't do COVID deaths. So, in other words, he has ideological priors that he's upholding and refusing to report COVID deaths that are COVID deaths. It just goes in as natural causes, and or whatever the family says it was, they just go with that. There's an easy way you could test it. You could test everybody when there's even a question if they have COVID. You could test them, and then you'd know if the people who are dying have COVID. But it's funny because the line that you hear oftentimes online is the opposite, that COVID deaths are way overcounted, and any little thing that they think maybe is it, they count as it, and then there's no evidence it's really it. And this is the line that you hear oftentimes on the internet. The fact of the matter is, and we don't just know from the Scientific American article that I showed you and the Missouri Independent article that just came out recently, which goes into detail about how in this county they're just like, we don't do COVID deaths here. We know this because historically, when you're in a pandemic, 100% of the time, the deaths are undercounted. Why? Because the ability to test and know and get an official death, we can't keep up. You can't keep up when you're in a pandemic. So the number's always undercounted. It was undercounted with the Spanish flu. It was undercounted in other pandemics. And what happens is, as more time goes by, the more people realize and the numbers are adjusted. And they give you a range, but usually the range is way higher than whatever the official numbers were during the pandemic. So historically, it's a truism that pandemic deaths are undercounted during a pandemic. That's just a historical truism. But now, a lot of the specifics, both in the Scientific American article and in this Missouri Independent article, really show that it may even be worse than we thought. Because you have the ability to test lags way behind. You have people who have, taken an ideological stance against it and refuse to count deaths as that when it is that. And they estimate, so I'll give, based on the Scientific American analysis, which was that other article there, they go on to explain. Now, this was before in the pandemic. This came out like months ago. But they said the real number is about 20% higher. So now we're at 800,000 deaths. So, in other words, they say the real number is actually over 1 million COVID deaths that we have. That doesn't surprise me at all. That doesn't surprise me even a little bit. And I do find it strange that, for whatever reason, the internet cut in the other direction and they thought the opposite. That if anything, this was being overhyped and the numbers were wrong in an inflated direction. That is not true. That's not even close to true. And there's actually a tremendous amount of data that points to the opposite, on top of the historical truism that I pointed out to you guys. I watched a great documentary. I wish I could remember the name. A great documentary on pandemics, and that's where I learned that from, that they're almost always undercounted during the pandemic. So, look, only reason I'm doing this segment is to give you guys the facts and the information, and you do with that information whatever you will, but I also wanted to push back on this bogus narrative out there that if anything, it's inflated. It is not. So, getting vaccinated is the best way to protect yourself, especially now because a lot of the therapeutics there's a shortage of them, like the monoclonal antibodies that only one of them works for Omicron, and now there's a shortage of it. So protect yourself as much as possible, that's for sure. And I hope everybody's staying healthy out there, because I know Omicron is really ripping through the country fast now. I know a number of people who've had it. Thankfully, they're okay. But, yeah, just want this fucking thing to end, that's for sure.